personally involved in this, then maybe they're voting on, where they're at relative to whatever questions you're asking. But I don't know what the questions are yet. You are setting up these as the questions, and maybe this is the math. I need to see a different exploration of that. I need to see somewhere where it's dramatic. Okay, when you have a performance, there needs to be drama. There needs to be a drama. Okay, and something, and I can't. But part of that, but see, what you're dealing with is exactly the possible situation where you have, these two different points of view. How do we make a coming together so that you create this burst of something greater than either?
In other words, you think the dramatic should really be about this?
I don't know what it should be. I'm not getting
things that we, the audience, evaluate in terms of this.
So we're talking about removing,
Instead of having nano skits, we have a play
removing judgments.
about this type of thing.
rather than it's like, I don't know what tableaus are, tableaus. I mean, I don't really. And skits are just, and are we into humor, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
Is humor a possibility?
Oh, yeah.
Is music and song maybe a possibility?
Everything
Anything
is
is possible.
The only thing that we have to work with is this system.
Okay, but now you have to use this, but no, so it is really like a set.
Yeah, it's a physical space
It's a
that
physical
three-dimensional
set.
space.
So what you have, now normally when you have the set, what you have first is the play. And then you design the set for the play. What you've done is sort of design the setting. And what's the play?
Yeah, or what is
Where's what you want to do this, what's the...
Yeah. How can we play in this space?
How can we play in this space is an interesting sort of... So as I said, when my first feeling was, how can I do this? Because my feeling was it was going to go in the direction of science. And I'd be interested to know if any group, except the ones who are doing the back app, which seems like a more straightforward thing. And how is that art and science? The only thing is they're going to come up with the technology, with the ability to do this thing, which tells you where the art stuff is. So that's basically scientific as well.
or the ocean?
And I don't know much about that.
Most of them.
To me, I don't see a whole lot of science in any of them.
Well, there's some ocean science, because they're talking about global warming and the impact on the ocean, ocean pollution.
So you could say that there is neither a lot of art in any of them or a lot of science.
Now, there was one in art that I was and that is the advanced artist who looks at chemical things and we're doing dynamic painting. You draw something out and you spray it with all the colors will change. And you spray another spray on it and it changes. Yeah, we were playing around with that.
Yeah.
With some abstract art.
And that would probably be easier to do than a lot of these other things.
And yeah, but we didn't get done.
But you didn't get
But, well, actually, yes and no. What they said is, we didn't win, but we'd like to give you some.
Why can't you do it?
I'm so perfectly able to do it. I just haven't heard it. I spent a number of times going down, teaching some basic numbers.
Well, it's also supposed to be a collaboration of artists and scientists, and there was only one scientist in that whole thing too. I think that was one of the problems with it.
But I'd be interested to see how much consensus there has been up until this point after as many as 30 hours or more of discussion, whether any of these groups actually have a project in place.
Well, for some people, I guess, are deciding we will have this for this house.
Is that
It's not the one we want.
scientific or
this is biology, so all of the biology involved. But basically, raise people's awareness of the fact we also have rats and mice and stuff and cows living among us, and we should be kind of them. I wasn't a here for situation because
this is the show I had in New York. And this is also the same thing, but this is only mapping ideas of Zen Buddhism in a three-dimensional space.
Ideas of Zen.
Yeah, the three jewels of Zen Buddhism, the Dharma, Sangha, and this is the 47th Street in Lexington. There's the, the gallery is just right down there across the street. So we're walking across the street. And then you look at the piece, and you don't go in the gallery, you look at it from the sidewalk, through the windows. And you'll see the three axes of words, but made out of ping pong balls.
That. You see, and you know how we say a picture is worth?
that's a weird thought. Something like that was said.
Where's the talk?
The words,
Oh, those, I can't see
you can't
that.
see those are signs.
So what did I say? I
The
can't see
face
that.
is basically this, but in 3D and in the space.
Okay, but then I don't have to listen to it.
No,
Okay?
you get
I
direct
could just see,
experience.
I could just see the thing and I
You get
could,
direct experience from it. But there's all,
I'm totally into that.
yeah, the art side of it.
Right, I'm totally into
Yeah.
But the science, okay, but here, so what I would say then, that the science is what you allowed, that allowed you to make that. So the science is the underpinning.
It's a fusion of both art and science.
Okay, but what all I see here is the underpinning.
Right. And
That is something I can understand.
yeah, but that's what we're wanting to do with this, but with theater. The trouble is that I'm not a theater person. I'm a visual artist and an engineer.
But then I have to have something that I can work with that I can make something theater out of. See, and the way I work best is with personal stories. I mean, I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but to take a group of people and answer a question. I haven't even come up with a question, but it would be something about, like, when did you, maybe, I don't even know because I didn't even make a note on this. But the question being, how do we work creatively? What's your creative process? That's a boring question, kind of, because in order to ask questions that people will write or talk interestingly about. And you know why I like to have people write rather than talk? Much more concise. Much more concise. It really, really works much better, especially if you put yourself in a quiet state beforehand and you don't come up with stuff that you think you're going to be writing about.
But talking has more of a direct experience than
Right, but you can do that as, I think you can come up with really great stuff written down. And you don't have to sit there and go through 30 hours a tape to find the great lines, okay? Because I give 5 to 10 minute exercises of doing it, okay? So one of the things that I would probably do, I don't know what the question is, maybe you could think about like what's the question about creativity? Is the question, when did you start thinking of yourself as a creative person? When did you realize that you were a creative person? What about before then?
Well, I always knew that I was creative, but I didn't categorize it. I was just creating. When I was a little boy, I was creating stuff, but I didn't.
Okay, I need to get a question that would get you talking about when you were a kid. In what ways you were creative. How did you? I don't know what the question is. You know what I mean? I don't know what the question is yet, but it's something about
Well, you just
how
had a
you
question.
found yourself. Yeah, but
You don't.
in order for the questions really to work, they go on a little bit. They go on a little bit.
When you're a kid, if you're in a nice household, Your parents just allow you to be yourself, and you just
I don't
follow
think
your
that's
bliss.
true. Okay.
You know?
But you were lucky. Not everybody's parents. Not everybody's parents do that.
But my father wanted me to be an engineer. So he was always feeding me engineering stuff. Toys to build things, and erector sets, and Legos, and all of these things. And I was 51 electronic kits. So I got my ham radio license when I was 14. So,
Okay, so what I'm also thinking is this is supposed to be a lesson plan at the end of all of these things. So how do you show people how you manage to do this and make it a replicable process if you don't have that dad? Which, trust me, a lot of
my dad-
people don't have that
my
dad.
dad did not want me to be an artist. He vehemently pushed me away from that at every move. And I finally, when I was in college, he was helping me. And then at one point he just said, you know, I'm done, helping you. And I was like, Dad, I want to be an artist, so I'm going
Done
to
helping
be,
But
financially.
But you know what? What he gave you, the toys and weirdness that he gave you, also contributed to your.
I made a living as an engineer. I mean, he finally won.
Huh. See, that's a really good story. But there's a real story there. You know that? And everybody's got some kind of story. Like,
But see, that's really away from this.
but maybe not, because it's the creative. If we're talking about the DNA of creativity in some sense, I don't give a shit about the DNA of creativity. That didn't really mean anything to me. The word that caught me was creativity. Because creativity doesn't matter whether you're talking about art or science or whatever. You're talking about creativity. And I think that society basically mitigates against that. You know what I mean? They don't really want you. I mean, basically, society promotes conformity.
He wants you to make money.
Well, and of course. And so when you're talking about art, basically, nobody is thinking about sitting and going to Paris, to be an artist anymore, to be an addict, to be hanging out with the people at the couple or something like that, and to be talking and drinking and going home and in a little dingy place.
When I told my father I wanted to be an artist, he said, son, I never sang a song in my life and I've got food on the table. If you can't sell it or eat it, throw it away.
See, are you having this?
These are quotes from my father.
But that's a real, maybe that's something we should be talking about too. Quotes from my father. But what if you can't this?
You can't sell it
Sell
or
it.
eat it, throw it away. Son, I never sang a song in my life and I've got food on the table.
See, and that, you see now, there's a dramatic moment. You see that?
I had a lot of problems internally
And you think
dealing
you're-
with
and this
trying to
is-
make my father happy.
Well, so
That's
do
the insurance of death.
and see, now, if we work with, how did these people in this circle, so here, for example, so you give, am I going to, see, I don't want to go through this whole thing, but I want to hear some of this stuff. This is why I don't work with the paper. But, okay, if we're sitting around in a circle, and each of you does some kind of a story about the problems, problems being, first of all, you say, who am I?
Yeah.
What do you do in this life? Tell me who you are. Give me your credentials. Give me your credentials, okay? Tell me what you've done. Make me, impress me, okay? Tell me who you are, what brought you to this little circle. So you say, my name is this is what I do, this is what I won these awards, I travel around the world engineering for people, but I'm also an artist, who also has done shows in New York, blah, blah, blah. And then you say, everybody says their little piece, who they are. But then we find out, how did they get to be who they are? How did you surmount the problems that you had as a kid. See, the first thing you told me is, oh, your father gives you all these things to play with, but there is kind of toys. They're the toys that are supposed to make you into the person he wants you to be. But what happens?
I started rebelling.
Although you use those toys.
I did. But see
But
that.
he won. But he won. In a sense, he won. But in a sense, you won.
The funny good thing about it is I always fought against, because my father always wanted me to be an engineer and I wanted to be an artist. The thing of it is that I really was an engineer all along. But I didn't, because my dad was pushing me, I didn't, I just as as children do, you fight it.
Fight the powers
Right.
that be.
Even as an artist, I keep trying to tell people, look, I don't want to identify myself as an engineer. I want to be identified as an artist.
I am a human being.
I am an artist. I'm an artist, And it's only been recently, in the last probably 10 years, that I've embraced both. I'm an artist and
See,
an
but that,
engineer.
you see how interesting that is as a concept? And maybe you could say the same thing because, and I don't want to hear, see, what I don't like to do is hear the whole story verbalized because then when we come to put it together, you've already lost that magic of spontaneity, and the magic of spontaneity is what makes these things really juicy enough to then make something out of. Okay? But so it has something to do with parental, like what the parents, because how can you model something based on your lives, reaching the point you're at today, so that kids could maybe learn how to do it?
I think my wife is just
As a counselor, I said, mine's good.
seriously, I refuse every time I'm asked to talk to young people about careers and science or everything else.
But see,
I
that's,
don't consider myself a role model. And it doesn't mean that.
I don't ever, a young artist, I don't recommend going into art. It's a freaking, it's been painful for me, doing stuff that nobody's interested in. I've been on this path that mathematical poetry, who gives a shit?
but some of it is interesting. See, but I felt the same way about that as I said about the sad-eyed lady at the lowlands. I like it. It looks interesting. I don't care if I understand where it's coming. Meanwhile, somebody put you in a gallery in New York, didn't they? So don't tell me nobody's paying attention at all. Somebody put you in a gallery in New York. Did you think about that when you were a kid? When you were in high school?
Yes, but I don't know.
But the thing is, how can you make some, how do you combine, what was that book, that movie that she made, that it's a Eastwood movie, the German person who was at Esalen, how to cook a life, not at Esalen, the one that made the bread, Pascala, how to cook a life. How you put this life, how you make a life together, because we all need art and science in our lives. Now the schools are promoting heavily science, and totally excluding art. What does that mean? Because making a career, making the whole point is not about making a career out of it, but having it be an essential ingredient in your life. And what you're talking about is
I think part of it is schools don't do it because it's perceived as good.
but that's of course the whole thing. It's useless.
It's perceived as being winning.
Music and art.
Yeah. That's what leftists do. That's what people do. Businessmen.
Well, actually, they made art serve the state. They created art. When you have that more fascistic governments, or whatever, art serves the state.
Socialist way of
Conservatives, black downers, they're black. black eye.
I love. And I just watched an interview with Jane Fonda in this new movie where she's playing this hippie grandma and Kathleen comes home to her when she has the divorce and the estranged family. And she said, well, I never was a hippie. I was in Kansas, you know, Barbarella married to what's his name, Becky. And she said, I was never a hippie. She had to tell me Catherine is a hippie and a Cherokee. And she had to tell me who Jimi Hendrix was. And because I have a line in the movie that says, my water broke when he was doing the Star Spangled Banner. And she said, I had never heard Jimi
My
Hendrix.
water
So
broke
she-
the first time I heard that.
Well, so she said, and then she played it, and she said, and my water broke. Anybody's water would Anyway, see, I think that this is the set, this is the look. What you have here is the look of the thing. And you can have the same little thing on the sides. So I am free to either decide or not to delve as deeply or as shallowly into it as I want. But I can certainly appreciate the look of the thing and feel something. And you can have maybe little, not just these little things, but other little things that are posted in different ways. I find it extremely annoying. I like Leonard's museum. I find it very annoying that they have too much content in museums, so you can't read. You can't look at an exhibit and read all and see whatever you want to see. I think it kills imagination. And they have a video thing that tells me anything I'm supposed to compare myself to the height of the length of my phone compared to this animal. You know, I don't want to.
You walk around the room, it's pre-recorded.
But I hate, I mean, I said that what's his name, Holden Caulfield, that he would never write that book because there's no mystery of the goddamn whale or the dinosaurs or anything in that museum anymore. You know, everything is like, they tell you how to think. They tell you what questions to ask yourself. I don't want you to tell me what questions to ask. I want to kind of discover what my own questions are, you know? And so there's something about that in any kind of creativity. You know, how can you develop? Okay, here's the question. How do you develop, if you're setting up like a lesson plan, maybe how do you develop the kind of self-confidence to fight what everybody's telling you should be doing. You should be thinking what you should do. See, any of this, you could use this. This could be part of the visuals.
This is the mapping
That's
system.
very funny. Andy goes are things.
But see, I'm mapping all of these aesthetic experiences I map in this system. And this is just like looking into the cube from one side. You know, you've got the aesthetics of non-utility, right? The aesthetics of utilitarian function. The aesthetics of direct experience. You know, it's thinking down here. So you've got, here's Deep Throat, pornography movie. You've got Peter Max, My Birthday Cake, Alhambra, Porsche, Bruce Lee's Best Move, the Ponzi Scheme.
Or are you doing this for this?
This is for this, yeah.
But see, I think this is incredible. See, to me, you could cut out all the conversation and just look at this. This is wonderful. But see, you can have this
Well, that's what I'm doing, with
projections
on the
all
wall,
over
on the wall.
of this. And so people, I mean, I just look at it, I don't need to ask questions about this. I love it.
What do you need?
I love this. The beautiful results. I mean, just looking at that thing makes me happy. Do you understand? Whereas the other made me anxious.
Well, these have all of these experiences.
So this is what you parted.
I mapped all of these
You parted that
experiences
off.
into this. I mapped all these experiences, fractal geometry, Robert Barry's
I'm seeing it as the
Van
other way.
Doesburg.
Do you understand? I'm seeing it as the opposite.
Diagram
I'm
zero.
saying that this is the artistic rendering of that. You understand? This is the underpinning.
No, this is an example of this.
But
This is a mapping.
But this is an artistic sort of mapping.
Well, it's a diagram.
But
Well, so is it.
but there's selection in color choice.
Yeah, I mean, and they,
I can see that. It's certainly different, I would map it differently. I would do
but then you
different,
do your own.
and I would choose different
You know,
examples.
oh, and you know what?
Different ways.
And there's an interesting point. Maybe everybody in the group should be doing.
Well, that's how you understand this thing.
Yeah.
But this is
You
how
have
you
to map it. You have to map it. To understand this, you have to do this.
Okay, so then my question is, what's his name? Arthur?
Arthur.
Okay,
He
would you do
refuses to
this?
do this. He won't do
I
it.
would.
He refuses.
I would not do this. But then there has to be something that you would do that can add to this. It doesn't have to be the same thing that you do. You understand?
Yeah, but Arthur
But the rest of you guys-
Arthur wanted
the rest-
spectacle and dramatic production.
Ta-da! But this is spectacle.
Well, yeah.
Do you understand? If you put this as a projection and you have each different guy, maybe in the group, is doing like their personal kind of thing of this, and I think that's interesting. You know, that expresses different people. Or maybe each of you would be standing next to your projection and saying, and this is my.
Unless you had a bunch of people arguing, you have the space to.
No, I don't want
to.
arguments.
That's drama.
Conflict is drama. Arguing is not necessary.
No,
Conflict can
arguing
be-
is the wrong word. No, you know, discussion.
No,
you know.
discussion is not. Discussion is anti-dramatic. Drama is we have.
Okay, let's do Beethoven's Fifth. John, I think it belongs right here. No, it doesn't. It
Oh,
belongs
no.
over here.
Oh, but here's the thing. When you were saying, when you said you didn't agree with this,
No, I didn't say I didn't agree. I would say I
you
would
would do it
do it
differently.
differently.
And what was the gift you would do differently?
Well-
You wouldn't use any of these.
I would choose a different set, somewhat different set of examples,
Aesthetic, yeah, the example.
just because they
So
would
why
come to my
can't you?
mind. They would
Why
come to my
can't-
mind.
So, then why can't they come to your mind? Why shouldn't they be yours? One of them would be about Greek something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I probably
Something would be
would.
about
Yeah.
personal.
Well, one could do this. One could walk in. You could have others to come in. Okay, you could have them start putting things on the wall. That's what we're doing.
But you could only get, and then what's the point?
What's the point?
Yeah, what's the point of doing that? You could do that at the end, saying, you can now enter your stuff onto the computer and we can look at it later. You know what I mean? So there's an aftermath to this, where they can input stuff and everybody can see it. Who wants to? But still, there needs to be the drama of something going down, okay? And what you're talking about, the reason yours would be different is because you would put your personal life into this. And you would have, this is yours. These are things that are interesting to you. He's going to have other things that are interesting to
Good.
you.
I suppose you have 2 or 4 people doing that without engaging audience.
No, but you can have the pieces. What could possibly engage the
Talking
audience
about a sculpture.
is that, no, what I'm talking about, it's possible. Remember, I don't have this yet. My feeling is I would start out, who are we? Who are we? How do we get where we are? And then there's this mapping thing, and here are things from your life that you're mapping. And maybe a very brief little explanation of something that you were doing now. Since I don't know the other guy, how many is in there in your group?
Well,
Seems like enough. And
Hands have been around.
you can't have people who aren't there. Okay? But you haven't started yet, so anybody who isn't there is lucky. Who wasn't there today is lucky. When you start, you say, this is the project we're going to be working on. Okay? And then you start something. Not talking about something, but starting to do something. And maybe each of you comes in bringing something like that. That's not how I would start. As I said, I would start with the personal, where you are actually learning something about each other and about maybe what,
We all know each other somewhat.
Are you talking about what we present on the page or present?
yeah, because I'm looking for characters here, and you are the characters. There are 4 characters in this play, as I see it. I'm very sorry none of them is a woman,
And
that she's not there.
There's some respect like
Okay, there should be somebody, and what is she? Is she different?
she's a musician.
She's a musician, so she's one of the several musicians.
Everybody is,
Is anyone a visual artist? Besides you?
well, no, Arthur.
Who is Arthur?
Arthur,
Oh, Arthur is an artist.
yes.
Okay, this is important.
Arthur is an artist. He thinks that he's doing, that does science and art, and he doesn't.
That's okay.
And
you know what?
He's a business owner.
Okay. But see, that is an interest, okay. See, that is your conflict.
No, there's lots of conflict with
Okay.
Arthur and
He
I.
thinks-
Arthur and I,
That's okay. He thinks he's an artist. Or you said,
No, he-
shit, what did you
It's not
say?
thinking, it's not.
he thinks he understands science.
Okay, that is interesting. Understand?
He's already told me, look, you don't need anything. I've already got everything together. I've got all of the skits, I've got everything all done. All you gotta do is just map it, or just bring it into your system. And it's like, but Arthur, you don't understand anything about
Okay, you
science.
can't work like that. You can't
And
work
that's
like
not a
but-
collaboration.
But, so here, what I hear is, you came in with something that you thought you were going to do as a skit, which was your radio play. And then you came out with this thing, and then you said,
And then
okay,
Joe
let's do that.
came in one, so that there
So you got
was
4 different guys,
doing
4
three
different guys doing 3 different things. No wonder you're fragmented.
Well,
Five
yes,
guys.
we decided we could
Five
word,
guys.
we could decide, we decided to word on this. After 30
Well,
minutes.
evidently
no,
not, evidently.
we didn't decide. Patricia's team decided.
Well, yeah, but we pretty much given up.
Okay,
We
so
put it,
here's
we
the
put it
deal.
in just in
Here's the
case.
deal. You need to think about what you really want to do here. This is not, the way you're working is not working. Okay? The way you're working is not workable. So you have to figure out, how are we going to do this? Are we going to do this? Because you could jerk off for the next 18 months and then just do something, whatever. Okay? So you have to figure out how you're going to do this. And ego, which is
You're talking to a Buddhist there. Remember?
Well,
well, I'm not a Buddhist, but I'm not a Buddhist, but I am Buddhist.
I got way too much ego to be
I am Buddhist. Well, you know what? I have, as many women do, a fragile enough ego that it's real hard, because one of the ways to be an artist is to have an impenetrable ego, that that no matter what happens, I will be cool with what I'm doing. Until the point where I have to cut off my ears. Although I hear there's a big book now that he was killed. Is that my phone? My mother? I said to my mother, I'll be finished in an hour.
Oh, yeah, some of them too, almost been 2.5 hours. It's like, I
No,
need
it's
to,
my sister.
like, I need to get.
Hello? Hello? Yeah, what's the matter? Oh. Yeah, I am. Can I call you later?
I've got
Oh,
to.
shit. Because I was going to go over there. Well, try calling one of... Okay, try to call one of the others and have them go over there. Okay? Well, I wasn't going to go. I don't know why she's not using her cell phone. Okay, I can't call her. My mother's phone isn't good. And then you buy her cell phone and she doesn't. She's 94 and having a hard time. So I mean, this is really one of the big reasons I'm still living. You here? How old? Yeah, my stepfather just died.
Hopefully I
want to be 96 years?
If I'm healthy, yeah. I don't want to suffer.
Yeah.
Well, there are different forms
My
of
mind is
suffering,
still
you
sharp,
know.
yeah. That's still over.
Oh, her
all
mind
suffering.
is still, yeah, but you can take it more. When you still have things to look forward to. And, you know, I don't know. It's hard. My mother says it's really hard. You know, at the end we did a 3-day party for her, stuff. And my stepfather would have lived to be 100 if, he always said, if maybe 11, but she couldn't take care of it. She couldn't deal with it. She couldn't get into his room without falling. She couldn't do this, you know. And so they, and these are people who were very, you know, prided themselves on, you know, I take care of myself, I'm independent, I'm the CEO of this hospital.
But also your friends
Well, she always, one of the things she said in my show, because I had them do give words of wisdom. Give me 4 words, expressive 4 words, your words of wisdom that you wish something that you wish you had known when you were young. And hers was start making younger friends. And so she did. You know, she had younger friends because otherwise they're all dead. So she has younger friends. You know, she can't move now. She was running through her 80s. And now she can hardly walk at all. That just happened since she got shingles, and since she got this, and since she got that. And so she's really, I mean, it's not like she hasn't had things happen, but now they're happening, and there doesn't seem any way to make them better. Okay. And so, there. And so if you're a Buddhist, then you have different ways of looking at these things. Well, my mother is not a Buddhist at all. And so, anyway, I think these things could definitely be the environment for something, but I think you do not have a show. And what you have, I fear, is several people each wanting to do their thing. And maybe none of the things are a thing that is inherently dramatic.
See, the musicians just want to do their music.
And the music could be part. See, I see a lot of parts and no center.
Well, because there isn't anybody but musicians. Myself.
And this other person, the other artist, oh no, she's a musician too.
Right. Everybody's except Arthur and
you don't have what this is supposed to be, which is a different, you don't have a visual artist, except for you who are already, you know, leaning towards the science.
Well, I can do both, but
well, I do visual arts,
yeah, and
big show.
Oh, so,
But I don't know how to necessarily how to integrate into this.
well, and I don't either, except by pretty much saying, okay, what can we make out of these people that's gonna be dramatic, that's gonna be something that somebody else would want to watch.
I think it's myself more
Well, you would be in that. But you would be the actors. You would possibly be the characters, no? I mean, you don't have to be. If you don't want to be, then somebody else can play your voices. But it would be somebody. Why would you hire outside of the group? You want more group? You want more voices?
Well, she would like it when it's got a bigger group.
Oh, you would like a bigger group?
No,
You
she
have
would
enough
like
trouble
that
with
bigger.
the
We need outside help to get this thing.
well, I mean, we're not really doing it because we don't have scientists in here. I mean, we're the only ones, and I'm not really a scientist. He's a
But
scientist.
you're a scientist. And so you don't, what you're telling me is you don't have scientists, you don't have artists.
Well, musicians are.
Right, they're one kind of artist.
Well, we have an artist. We have 2 different musicians. But
Arthur
we
is
don't
the
have,
first one.
you don't have people who can put together or who can produce it or.
But you don't have you don't have the willingness to do it. You know what I mean? I didn't even understand, when Tricia emailed me, she said, oh, it was a couple of weeks ago, as I said, right in the middle of everything. She said, well, you know, they're thinking they need a skit, but they need somebody to help them put it together. So a skit, I didn't hear anything about skits. Or I looked at the names of the things, and nothing sounded like it left out to me. It's like, oh, there's a good idea for it.
Well, yeah.
You know, the urban wildlife. I did a book about walking San Diego, and it's all about, what you can see on the trails. That's actually, part of life. It's on and that sort of thing. But I always felt like it should be like a real folksy way, so it's like taking a walk with me and Barbara. And I would say to Barbara, who was the one who knew all about everything, and who brought all the classes and things, I'd say, okay, what's the most interesting thing you know about that? Okay, how do we get to the most interesting stuff? Like, where's the real juice? Where's the stuff? And that's the same thing with saying here. You have the visual. These things can be great visually. So you have that. You have what you've done already. The balloon idea and the whole thing like that. That could be great. But what's the story? What is the thing that would make people want to see it and hear about it and try to do this? Because so far what you have is an example of non-communication. In a sense. And it's not in the whole sense, but...
No, I agree. I mean,
See, I envisioned a bunch of script writers, and I could...
a bunch of...
No, each doing one skit. Like with that Pennsylvania anthology.
But you don't have a script writer.
No,
Right, that's true, we don't have anything. But
I was thinking that was a part of one of my videos.
Does it go with any of these things?
It could be now.
It can be mapped. Well, but maybe that's not enough of a dramatic purpose.
Possibly. The question wasn't originally intended to be about the done projects.
Well, it doesn't have to be about you, but I'm not seeing anything else that's emerging. And I always think people are always interested in people's stories and how you got to where you are, so that maybe I could get to that place too. And if you have a group of people, every story will be different. And then how can I do that if I'm a kid and I'm lost and I have an absentee father and my mother is drinking and I don't, I like to draw, but I don't know,
can one come up with a story just out of their own creativity?
Absolutely.
Can one work with a limited number of constraints, like 3 constraints?
One of the 3 constraints.
That this story has to deal with the beauty of utilitarian function, the beauty of mental ability, and the beauty of thinking.
I'm assuming somebody can come up with it, but it isn't.
Okay. Let's go the other direction. How about the 3, something that just has direct sensory experience, something that requires physical ability, craft. You have to be able to be practiced at this thing, craft, and then it has no utilitarian function. That would be very easy for you. Just about everything
But I
that
don't
you've
have
done.
anything that grabs me as story.
Any story.
But that's not how I do stories. I mean, even when I'm writing fictional things, which I have occasionally done, I come up with a character, not an idea for something I want to represent. And see, that's what I'm saying is the difference between art and science, perhaps. It's like, I just am going to do something. I'm going to do it in this medium. And let's see what happens, rather than it's going to be about this. You're giving me a theme, which is essentially a non-dramatic theme, and I'm supposed to come up with a story about that illustrates that. So that's hard for me.
It's difficult for everybody.
And so what is not hard for me is personal stuff, and since you didn't have anything else, that's all I can come up with. Because, as you see, it's immediately interesting when somebody starts saying something about their real life experience. And people are very interested in that. So you have an audience for it who is either totally untrained in art or not, and art science, or not totally untrained in art science. They will be interested in the story no matter what. And they could be interested in the look of the things without knowing anything about it. So then the question is, what's the lesson? How how do you follow your own, how do you establish a creative process for yourself? You know, what's the lesson? What do you want to teach? Do you know that?
Well, me, this whole thing is about teaching.
But you want to teach what do you want to teach?
What is aesthetics? How can we look at aesthetics differently and see that aesthetics isn't a black and white situation?
Okay,
That
could you use
every
not the word
aesthetic,
aesthetics? Could you use a word besides aesthetics?
emotional feeling in an object. Emotional feeling from an experience.
Oh, I had a great experience. I was diving off the barrier.
Was it art or
Is
was
that
it
an
science?
aesthetic?
Are you sure?
It was just an experience. I didn't consider it either art or science. Although, of course, I was making use of.
Yeah.
I was making use of scientific things to make things that allowed me to dive.
My birthday cake isn't really art or science either. There's lots of things that aren't. The Ponzi scheme isn't art or science either.
That's right. That's right.
But it's the beautiful thing to occur.
I don't know what that, I was looking over different organisms. I was doing a lot of science, a lot of thinking, a lot of experiencing.
Well, see, I mean, that is my love of underwater. I think it's gorgeous, and I feel like I'm flying. You know, I see how it's just like flying. You know, the turtles. And I love the colors, so that is an aesthetic experience. But to use, I'm not being very mental. And the first time I went into the water in St. Croix when I was in my early 20s, I almost forgot to breathe. I mean, I couldn't die. Because I was just... And the science of that is, you can't even see it. They have artificial leaves now.
The Mississippi's killed everything. The Mississippi River has killed everything. New Orleans, I guess all the oceans, all everything.
Well, but the Mississippi is not there. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot here that you have that's wonderful, but I feel pretty much as I did at the beginning. I mean, I don't want to come in and take over your game. That's not my idea. But I don't see a way that I can find my way into this.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone. I think one of the things that all of these groups are going to find is that, everybody's talking about art and science being so similar and everything.
I don't know who could say that.
And Arthur thinks it's the same thing. He can't.
But that's one person, not everybody.
Arthur and I thought but it's going to be very difficult to put art and science together and do it effectively, because generally everything I see these collaborative art and science, and always science illustrated by artists.
That's right.
And it's like, that's not interesting
Or
for me.
it's technology providing techniques.
Exactly, just the other way around.
It's like
It's just the other way
It's like
around.
the EAP.
But I mean, to me, it seems like you could do something here. But then it would be doing it, I mean, the only thing, the talent is not enough. Okay? And see, I mean, for me, I always find the personal things incredibly interesting. So I see that you could do that because you have the wherewithal, you have the self, you have the stories, you have the stuff, and then let something emerge. But then this has to be the environment for it rather than the whole rationale. I mean, it is maybe the whole rationale for me. but then it's like, what could emerge?
Unless you map these stories in this space, and as you change, as the story changes, you move location and space to where that part of the
Now
story.
but then the mapping is between art and science. The mapping is sort of, like, are you moving more artsy or more science?
Difficulty is between getting the bigger dimension. It's easy enough to move an actor around the story or a group of actors and presenting something here and then going over here and presenting something else.
Well, that's called like theater in the round or something like that.
Yeah, except the audience is probably
Did you ever see any of that stuff in the 80s? Like there was a lot about when you change rooms. They actually did one at CSD. I can't even remember what it was. Maybe something or Shakespeare or something like that at the library underneath the
Well, there's been some where people
and
go around.
around and we would move to different spaces.
Yeah, they did that just recently.
I'm sure they can.
I didn't go to that.
But there was something
Yeah,
in Pasadena with Fornes, Maria Fornes, where we actually changed rooms places and brought the next piece up or another piece up.
They did that at UCSD recently. They had one group would perform in different locations.
Well, this was actually a story where you followed it and it went in different ways, or you walked in. In the '60s in New York, there were things, remember, that you walked into that were not ongoing. People would live on stage and come in and do that. There was a lot of weirdness in the '60s and '70s.
I remember a writer who sat in the store window and actually read the public debate about the store.
While he was sitting in the window. There was a lot of stuff in the '60s and '70s which were a very experimental time for the arts. Probably the last experimental time for the arts. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen again. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen again. But because it came out in the '50s. I was a child in the '50s, excuse me, and I was in New York where the McCarthy thing was like, there was, and where we wore dog tags when I was in second grade, dog tags around our neck so they could identify our bodies after the Russians bombed us. And I have apocryphal memories. Of that time. How scared I was. But look, we would say because we had in the cafeteria, not like my little sister or my parents, where they were, and the sirens would go on. So we came out of the '50s, which was right wing, and we didn't come out at the beginning of the '60s. It was the middle of the '60s. It was later.
Well, I grew up in my father's in Wilshire. We have a ground zero. That's a Queen's Care. My uncle was a farmer. Had a missile silo a mile east. After they decommissioned it, 20 stories down. A little city underground with a big hole in the ground.
That's big.
Missile comes out.
Because they think about the kids today being so, what about that? I mean, we grew up in a very strange and screwed up way. And I'm in New York, so they were talking about, okay, if you build a fallout shelter, if you build yourself a bomb shelter, and your neighbor wants to come in, you only got a gun to shoot them.
Oh, yeah. I remember one of the side of Fred Davis when the Willard Living house burned down. Actually, his fallout shelter burned down.
It's fallout shelter. I mean,
and the question is, how many biggest do you want to survive? Is it worth it?
And who wants to survive?
Yeah.
And there were those movies, remember? There were all those in the end of the world movies. I mean, there still are. But they were just as real. They were pretty real.
My parents wanted me to get some military training so I could help survivors, organize the survivors. They seriously. Seriously.
I don't know.
And this was actually in the 60s, after.
Oh, right, after what you think, that period was. Well, it went on. The Red Menace did go on.
I was here for register in the 60s. My parents really objected to the first thing being not being but also having friends who have ears. My father said, look, why don't you wear a suit to the university and change it for the around? You shouldn't be walking around with hands and knees. People think you're one of them. That the arts are, the arts piece in there.
I just wrote an article about that because they had that show about the La Jolla Art Center that they had that show at the Oceanside Museum about the La Jolla Art Center, which brought in for a very few years alternative kinds of people to a place that was doing landscape painting.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, as soon as the art school got
And
a
suddenly there's
reputation,
these weird, they closed
they
it.
closed it, yeah.
And so that was pretty interesting, and that was in the 60s. That was up to well, La Jolla was not exactly in the forefront of anything.
Still isn't.
And you know, and the thing is that how did they build UCSD? Because they had covenants in La Jolla, as they did in Metro Santa Fe. You couldn't rent Jews. You couldn't sell to Jews. And so when they were looking at that property, and that became UCSD, they went to the town council in La Jolla and they said, look, we're going to have professors. That's our campus, we're going to have professors. And we're not going to allow them to do so. You're not going to move, you're going to move somewhere else.
Well, that's what they said. In fact, San Diego State is hoping to get one of the new campus. You know, they had all that free land. Kept down,
That's right.
and the government
And all the
gave it.
military.
In fact, the other thing is the rifle range had so much metal, they actually sold the red side of the country. And they hold it away and resmelt it, and there was so much copper and lead steel in it, the economically valued it.
Well, the Japanese were really bad.
Well, actually, my dad was an architect. He built houses too. And they built down. Came across all sorts of wires and everything. But those will be building places.
Well, there is, I know there is in, what do you call it, up by Cabrillo.
Yeah, there's a probably building. It's interesting. I used to date a Japanese
Well, I had, when I taught life story writing, I had some in my class.
They actually, the family settled in because the local council were very friendly.
That's because they didn't know anyone. I mean, they hadn't seen
Oh, no,
anyone.
they had jobs.
They hadn't seen anyone.
Yeah, except that by 40.
Californians are
By
very,
40.
very, you know, when I first came here, I thought, oh my God, they have all these Mexicans. There's not even an influence in the music. You know, I come from New York. Everybody hated everybody else. When you first came, you know, everybody that knew had a fight for their piece of turf. But then you became like a New Yorker, you know, and the music integrated, the Puerto Rican music, all this. I come here, and like, even rock and roll was like white. Rock and roll was like, and then there was R&B, it was black, and Mexican was like nothing.
South. Still is.
Well, but now at least the Mexican, you know, you have all that Norteño and all that Norteño stuff. California's always been very bad about, you know, the Chinese could come in and build the railroad, and then it's time to leave. You got 24 hours to get out of
No,
town.
when I was in Houston, I have a friend who was Chinese American from Houston. He said that his grandfather originally came over here because he got tired of fighting in Vietnam. Had to move to Canada, so they couldn't buy land. And basically couldn't. He said he was in California. He moved to Texas, we get that, because everybody else was the best.
Seems like four.
And he said, in Houston, that's not important. So you can go to school.
I actually think that this is the importance of this is how do you get different people? You only have 4 people and you haven't written 5. One is not there.
6, actually, the one is not there.
Oh, 6 is the one who's not there?
Arthur, Jonathan, Joe, John, Ted, and Nathan.
Okay, so there is 6. Not a large group. And you can't reach a consensus.
Well, I think we've reached a consensus we're gonna do this rather than something else. That's
But you
consensus
can't, you
for
haven't got a
me.
project delineated yet because of because of whatever. And it's not, and when you say you know, at the end of a lot of times, it's still fragmented. Now, there is something very important because the point of this, as I understood it, was about how do you come together? How do you get things, how do you get people to embrace art and science and their own creativity?
So first of all, you gotta know the difference between them. How can you embrace them and put them together if you don't even know what they are?
Does this teach them what they are?
That's exactly what this does. That's the whole purpose of this thing, is to teach you what art and science is by analyzing the components of an aesthetic experience in terms of art and science.
You might make that a little more explicit.
Make it what?
More explicit in the labeling. More explicit.
More
in
explicit.
labeling.
What do you mean?
Well,
okay.
I mean, you know,
Here is.
No, I know.
We didn't get that far. I mean, you know, it was here, but we didn't get that
well,
far.
I realize that. I'm thinking, design, these are much more scientific, direct experience. Science can be the utilitarian. Technology.
Science is utilitarian.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, that,
Well,
not
research,
necessarily.
Research can be
pure mathematics.
I mean, I'm basically doing pure research.
Oh, and then there's a-
Looking at chemistry is relevant to the organism. We're having to reconstruct chemistry. Trying to figure out what kind of chemistry is possible, what kind of they work. So obviously, there's actually, you see the whole character, in fact, it has no value except in science. Knowing in the sense of science for science's sake. To that extent, I think science will have something. Technology is the application.
Technology is the application.
Science itself. Science itself.
But what's art's application? Publicity?
No, it's an
commercials?
experience. It's an
I
experience.
think it's an exciting experience.
It's a sensory, aesthetic experience. It turns you on. It doesn't have to have any meaning or anything.
And for that reason,
But there's a value.
and for that reason, I think a lot of scientists are far more about art than artists are about science.
See, I absolutely believe that, but that is also the story of language. Because a lot of that language is very off-putting, and you know what? I had a mathematician friend who always used to say that. She said, you know, if art, if mathematicians, you know, if we don't know anything about art and literature, they consider us Philistines. But you know, look at how many people who are literary or artistic or whatever, who don't know anything at all about math.
And they're proud of it. And they're proud of it.
I'm not proud of it.
No, but I've known people who were. They're proud not to.
Not to know any, well, because certainly not younger ones at this point. The younger ones, I mean, basically, you know, the whole thrust is to knowing more about that. So what's
Yes.
We're videotaping across that chair there, but all these, you're fine here.
you know, I knew I would enjoy meeting you, but I kind of, if you ever think that you need or want me, you know, to come on board, that would be fine. But at this point, I don't see where I would fit in it, which is basically the thing I saw before we started.
Well, that's possible. You have to you certainly get this sort of insight, and I think it's very possibly as we, or as Kevin,
You know, and that's the thing about it, is we're talking about going in a direction I have no idea about. It's like, to me, it seems like since we have musicians,
Well, you don't
we should be
necessarily-
writing music and do what we know how to do. Why, you know, theater sounds like a fun thing to do, but I don't think it's gonna happen.
Well,
You know, we could
you could do whatever.